All right, everybody, welcome to literally one of the Skoll World Forum Ecosystem Day. We're one of the many sessions. And my name is Courtney Savvy-Lawrence, and I'm really excited to be here on behalf of the Oxford Climate Tech Initiative. We're just launching. And this is a session that's dedicated to the future of climate tech collaboration and systems change. We have an amazing lineup of events and speakers for you. But to get started, what I'd love to do is to have everybody, if you have the ability in the chat box, just type literally what city you're joining us from. So we know we're scattered all across the world, and thanks to technology, we get a chance to connect just like this. But just getting a sense of the cities, the countries, the points of view coming up soon. Lots of different time zones here, I see. Amazing. Okay. Cool. So please keep doing that. Introduce yourself. We'll have a chance in a moment to kind of connect even more deeply. But what I'd like to do is just go ahead and get started and share with you a little bit about what's ahead. So big welcome from all of us. And, you know, we actually launched this event through Eventbrite and just took a screenshot. We've got over 300 people signed up from most continents, actually. And so I can see from the chat box that the cities are well represented. So the first thing before we get started, we do want to hear from you in terms of, you know, what are you, this is a Mentimeter. So if you're not familiar with Mentimeter, we're just crowdsourcing your perception and trying to see, you know, in this group, how would you define and describe climate tech in 3 words without using those words specifically? So I'm going to put the link in the chat box as well, but you can also use, you know, from the desktop, from your phone. But what comes up for you when you think of climate tech, and you know, how would you describe it if we could not use the word climate and tech? So the Mentimeter link you can click on is in the chat box. Thanks, Abrar, for putting it there. And we'll look for that in just a moment. But this is your chance to let us get a sense collectively if maybe we have some patterns that are overlapping in terms of the way that we're thinking about this, or maybe we're still quite curious about it too. So 1 second, there we go. Now, how is today going to work? We've got 2 parts. We'll keep it nice and simple. You should be able to check into the Mentimeter now. So I'll show you that in just a moment. Thanks for that.
To open the, I think it's closed. You have to open the.
It's open now.
Okay.
Yep, I'm seeing some entries come in, so it should be live now. Thanks. 2 parts to today. There's an overview and a lightning panel, and then, as you probably already know, we have an ecosystem R&D mapping, and this is a really an open space that we are literally using to get your perception, your perspective on the ways in which the movement, the direction in which climate tech is headed. And it's really important, so we do hope you stick around for that. And the lightning panel is here to open our appetites, to start with the questions versus the answers. And we have an amazing lineup of speakers from around the world to share their perspective. So we thought it might be nice for us to actually share a little bit about why the Climate Tech Initiative, which is launched within the past few months alone, why does it exist? What are we trying to achieve? And I'm first going to pass it over to Dr. Abrar Chaudhry at the Business School of Oxford University, the SAID Business School. Over to you, if you could share a little bit of the context.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Courtney, and welcome everyone. It's just wonderful to see this entire group come together, and you know, so many participants really focused on this challenge. So if I was to sum up this whole idea behind the Oxford Climate Tech Initiative, you know, we understand that, you know, climate is one of the most pressing challenges, you know, of our generation, of our future generation as well. And we've had decades of excellent work in policy, in science, you know, to actually come to a stage where we understand this challenge is happening, or, you know, climate is real. I think where we are right now is in the era of action, that we really need to find solutions. And that was really the thought behind this initiative, that, you know, how can we bring, you know, the best of the best together? We get climate entrepreneurs, policymakers, funders, you know, academics, to now really move climate change to climate action. And what really Oxford provides is this safe space, this convening space for all of us to come together and have these really important and sometimes difficult discussions of, how do we actually not just think about individual initiatives or individual actions, but how can we bring our collective thoughts, minds, ideas together to actually shift the system? And I think that's what we really need. At the school, we're really big on thinking about system change, that we alone or a single actor or a single initiative will not be able to move this challenge. It's when we start to think in a systems perspective, where we try to link different elements together, from the solutions to funding to policy to research, is when we start to get robust and really, really important solutions. So this initiative itself is a first step. It's a step to bring all of you together and to really start to crowdsource these ideas, because we as a team have some understanding, but I think the real answers lie with all of you. So really looking forward to today's session. Again, I'd love to welcome all of you, and I hope that this is the first step to many engagements that we will continue to have. So I'm going to hand over on that note to our co-lead, Jamil Wine, who will talk about a little bit more detail on what the Climate Tech Initiative is and what we're trying to do. So thank you all, and look forward to the session today.
Thanks a lot, Abrar, and just big pleasure to get the chance to share this opportunity with everybody. And thanks so much to Courtney and Rob also for being just fantastic colleagues here, as well as all the moderators, panelists, facilitators. We're just getting started, and this is, I think, an exceptional launch and opportunity for us. And obviously, thanks to Skoll. So as Abrar said, we've been talking about this issue for a little while between the 3-4 of us that got this started. And I think we can't emphasize enough that we want to convert this into an enabling platform for others to be able to leverage, whether it be through events like this or creating new knowledge and partnerships, which we're already in the early stages of putting together. And I think, as Abrar said, we want to be able to open up the doors to kind of all different elements of this ecosystem, right? So the panelists today are coming from various corners of the globe, representing different types of sectors and subsectors in the larger climate tech space. Later in the session, I'll be speaking a little bit about what we have in store for the near term and medium term for the OXCT. But what we'd also encourage you to do is, during the session today and in the follow-up, we want to be able to engage with as many of you as possible in a productive way. As Abrar said, there's ample room for partnerships and ways that we can coordinate and collaborate, and we want to be able to use this as a platform where that type of coordination can happen. And so we're really excited to start the conversation today, but know that this is just the beginning of something that we want to be building over time with all of you. And on that note, as an example of how this collaboration can come to fruition, I'd love to hand it over to Candice Amori from On Deck, who runs their Build for Climate program, who's working with us and collaborating with us today on this event. So Candice, thank you, and over to you.
Thank you. It is awesome to be here. It's great to see all of you here, and it's an honor. And so On Deck Climate Tech started as a program where we brought together 150 to 200 experts in climate, outside of climate, just folks who wanted to build in climate. So it was about bringing in all hands on deck, of course, to bring in more folks in climate, Bias for Action, more shot goal in terms of companies started. And now we have this $100 million accelerator. It's community backed. The idea is to expand access and really support climate tech companies and founders for the long run. So that's a bit about On Deck Climate Tech. And we see OXCT as a partner in the work that we're doing. And we're very excited about this Oxford ecosystem because we share a similar mindset that this is such a complicated and exciting space. And because of that, it's so important to collaborate amongst climate experts, experts outside of climate, right? Tech experts, academics, government and regulatory experts, just bringing in all these different types of backgrounds and expertise to make a difference in climate and work together. And so we're thrilled to be here and just looking forward to this event. Thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much. So we know it takes an ecosystem, and of course, what better way to celebrate that than on Skoll's Ecosystem Day. With that being said, I also wanted to kind of, mention again, we've already discussed a little bit about why, but today is really about starting a next generation of collaboration between this community practice, particularly in this era in which the climate change agenda is something that is so critical for literally all of society to be thinking about. And we're asking critical questions today, some of which we'll obviously go through in just a moment. But I did want to acknowledge that this is 100% volunteer driven at this moment. It did, let's say, start thanks to the initial concept being created through Dr. Abrar Chaudhry and Jamil Win, who just spoke earlier. But anyone that you see with the bright orange backgrounds are volunteers that are going to be helping guide you throughout the session today. So just wanted to give a shout out. We have over 40 volunteers, many of which are students, some executive MBA students like myself, some MBA students, but many others that are actually just practitioners in the space. So big thank you to all of you. So the lightning panel, right? This is why we're here as well. So the learning and inspiration from around the world, as I mentioned in the very beginning, we're starting with questions first and foremost. So what I'd like to do is just literally, this is be the order of our speakers. Lightning means fast. That's part of the key here. So we're going to ask each of the speakers for about 1 minute or so, not only to introduce themselves, but to also let us know what's the big question that they're chewing on. What's the big question around climate tech that you're not quite sure about? Maybe that you still feel unresolved, or maybe as a practitioner, as a researcher, as someone in the field, what are the things that you are also very much curious about? So you can see literally on the slides, we've got representation from a variety of places. We're going to hear a little bit more, but first, just to say some of these key questions that we're looking to explore is about inclusivity. It's about how is climate tech created? How is it deployed? How do we, as we know, quite a lot of funding is moving in the system. How do we ensure that it's not a winner take all, where unintended consequences manifest 5 to 10 years down the road, and then we look retrospectively back and wish we did it differently? What does it look like to have policy involved? What kind of policy environment is needed? And then also, as we move forward in terms of next generation ways of collaboration, obviously today is a collective intelligence type of conversation. What other kind of organizational models might there need to be made? How do we scale different types of efforts? And then what are some of those strong investment and challenge opportunities, but also for communities that might need them the most? So those are some of the hefty questions that we may touch on, and let's see what we can cover. But first, we'd love to we'll go in this order again, Bankole Olorantuba from Nigeria Climate Innovation Center, if you don't mind, giving a quick intro of yourself, but letting us know what are some of the top questions that come when you're thinking about climate tech too. So over to you, Bankole.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bankole Olorantuba. I lead the team at the Nigeria Climate Innovation Center, and we are being, set up to drive for a viability of a green economy in Nigeria, which is quite challenging, if you ask me. And so some of the kind of questions that have been bugging me so lately, and as well, as the team or the whole of ecosystem per se, is around creating functional, technology, looking at the fact that looking at the different gaps that Africa is facing, and as well ensuring that there's equality in trade or fairness in trade when it comes to circularity. How to avoid things like turning Africa into a dumping ground, and how not to make the mistakes that have been made over years to ensure that whatever is being done around climate change really speaks about climate change. And whatever businesses that are being created also around climate change creates that opportunity for both either countries, organizations, or so to rise. The international adoption and also view around climate change in Africa is also a very big challenge from my own perspective, and how not to view Africa like another project, but rather as a contributor and also a partner on how we can all solve this together. Also, we're really worried about the use of technology. One thing we've seen over the years is what does impact mean to us in Africa, and what does impact mean to those who fund some of the impact-driven projects in Africa. So I think I'll stop there, and I believe that in the course of our conversation, we will have a few answers and share a few models and insights on how this can be done. Thank you very much, Courtney. Over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that opening. And it's absolutely connecting with all of these bigger lines of inquiry, I think, that we just touched upon. And great intro too. Thank you. So over to David Galepo. I believe you may be based in Thailand at this moment, hopping around. But please, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit more about yourself, SDGX, and some of the big questions also that are top of mind for you.
Thanks, Courtney. It's great to be here. It is a great initiative in that sense. My name is David. Initially, I'm born in Canada, but I spent most of my private sector life, corporate finance, in Europe. But I joined the .com phase, had 3 startups as an entrepreneur. 1 failed miserably, but 2 got lucky. And I started to look around from corporate world to the startup world. And then I started to look at the development world. So I joined the United Nations in 2005, and I was with them for about 12, 13 years. Recently left, we, with 2 other co-founders, created SDGX, which is an investment. We do investments. We've created a climate technology fund. We're on our 4th investment. We just completed our 4th investment. But another side of me, I do a lot of research. So I run a social technology lab out of the US, somewhere between MIT and Carnegie Mellon. And we look at a lot of advanced technologies that are non-commercialized. They won't be on the markets for another 3-4 years. So we look at the social impact of that. So one of the biggest challenges we're looking at, certainly from an investment side, is how do we match today's ideas with tomorrow's technology? And there's a lot of great technologies coming down the pipeline, rather sophisticated technologies, but there's a lot of great ideas. And add on top of that, scalability. So how do we take some of these ideas and scale them? Scale now is going through a bit of a transformation compared to what the internet, one single, rather non-sophisticated technology. But when we get these columns, these collections of 6 different types of brand new technologies, and how do they converge? And that's where the real excitement, I think, is around climate technology. It is taking the convergence of a lot of these clusters of technology coming down the pipeline and really using that and leveraging that for scale. So those are the 2 big things: today's ideas, tomorrow's technology, and scale. And obviously the name of the company is SDGX, so we're very much on the impact or the sustainability question too. Thank you, Courtney. I'll hand back to you.
Okay, thanks so much, David. And it's been fun to watch also, I think the evolution of a lot of our speakers' careers and the ways in which, things are moving. And David, for sure, as a futurist, bringing it back to planet Earth has got lots of interesting things in the pipeline. I'm going to now move over to Dr. Aisha Khan with Acumen Pakistan, CEO. Aisha, please, a quick intro if you don't mind, and then sharing what are the big questions that are coming up from you when you think of through the lens of climate tech?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And good morning, afternoon, evening to everyone who's listening. It is amazing to see the range of people in on this. And so it's really cool to be here. I'm Aisha Khan. I am the Acumen Regional Director for Pakistan, and we're currently in the process of raising Pakistan's first climate adaptation fund. But, when we think about climate change and climate tech in general, I think my starting point is to zoom out a little bit, because we're really living in unprecedented times, right? This is a time of such extreme inequality, exacerbated by COVID. And yes, there is a climate catastrophe. So when I think of climate tech, on the one hand, the ability for scale, which, a couple of people mentioned before, is just so powerful and so amazing to think through. But to make sure that the 3 billion people who are actually most vulnerable, again, the poorest end up being the most vulnerable to climate change, that we don't lose sight of that. Because if all we do is mitigate carbon, we end up leaving out so many of the most vulnerable. So my question is, how do we work with the tools of climate tech to make sure that we keep the most vulnerable at the center of everything we do and develop solutions that indeed focus on that. So back to you, Courtney.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Dr. Aisha. And if you're just joining us, I know that we've got a few people that have been joining over the past few minutes. We are in the midst of the lightning panel, but I'd also like to mention that in the chat box, there is a Slido link. So if you have questions as we go for the panelists, please park them in the Slido. We'll get to those quite soon. So we have also popping around the world, early days over there for Mia, I believe in California, if I'm not mistaken. Mia, tell us a little bit more about LowerCarbon and some of the top of mind, front burner things that you're wondering about. Over to you.
Thanks, Courtney. And hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening for some of you. So my name is Mia Jawara. I am a general partner at LowerCarbon Capital. LowerCarbon is a venture firm focused on backing early stage companies building solutions to the climate crisis. And we think about that in three overarching categories. The first is emissions reduction across all sectors of the global economy. So this includes investments in everything from alternative proteins to electrification of transport and the built environment to nuclear fusion. The second category is carbon removal, with the understanding that even if we move as quickly as possible on emissions reduction, there is going to be the need, as evidenced by the latest IPCC report, to actually draw down CO2 from the atmosphere. And so it's a combination of nature-based solutions as well as engineered. And the third category is buying more time for communities on the front lines as well as for ecosystems while we move as quickly as we can on those first two categories, but with the understanding that some level of human and environmental suffering is unfortunately baked into our future based on emissions so far. The two questions that are top of mind for me recently, and I hope it's okay that I ask two, but one is how the landscape for technologies in that third category of buying more time will evolve over time, and as the need, particularly as the need becomes more pressing. I think the adaptation and resilience landscape is one that has been kind of historically under innovated and under focused on relative to the category of innovation of mitigation. And so we'll look forward to seeing that evolve and trying to categorize some of those solution sets in that space. The second question is around how we balance investing in permanent carbon removal, which often is engineered, or technologies, while also not letting perfect be the enemy of the good in bolstering categories of nature-based solutions that maybe have inherently higher risk of reversibility or counterfactual risk, but which feel particularly important given both the ecosystem services as well as community benefits associated with a lot of those projects. So two things that I'm kind of thinking about these days, and I'll hand back to Courtney. Thanks, everyone.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mia. And thanks for joining us early over there as well. So last but not least, Enes Rimawi, if you don't mind, from Catalyst Investment Management, share a little bit about your background and perspective as well. What's front burner, what's top of mind when you're thinking about the climate tech agenda? Over to you.
Thank you, Courtney. Pleasure to meet you. And I've known Jamil for a very long time, so it's great to be here today from his time in Jordan. And I would say as a regional investor in primarily renewable energy and more recently adaptation, storage, water treatment, few factors. One, what are we going to see happen with panel prices? That's more tactical, but they've jumped up and they've made a lot of projects infeasible. We were commercially viable on renewables at below 3 US cents per kilowatt hour in the MENA region. Very attractive, but we hope momentum continues and doesn't change with the supply chain issues in wafers and for PV panels. That's one. Two, energy storage. We continue to look for the reducing price on lithium ion batteries, but they're not really the solution for what we need for round the clock renewables. We need something that can deal with multiple cycles efficiently, and we're looking at iron flow and other types. So I think energy storage will allow us to get to the 80 to 90% renewables. This is on the mitigation side. And finally, the adaptation side for us, approaches for zero discharge desalination. and water treatment. So we can desalinate water to create more supply. Of course, we have to address the demand issue, but how do we create more supply without negatively hurting the environment? So being able to deal with the brine efficiently and create something out of it. And I would say one other area that's become super hot is green hydrogen. We're seeing a lot of large projects being planned and studied in the region. Can be a game changer, but these other things I mentioned have to come together along with, electrolyzer and ammonia technology, also, becoming efficient. But we're very optimistic, but we just want to keep the momentum.
Thanks so much. Great. So we've heard from our lightning round. This is our lightning round of introductions, as well as a little bit around the point of view in regards to where people are sitting and where the curiosities lie, but also some of those trends and spaces. And of course, we obviously have a spectrum here of people working from micro to meso to macro and across the whole, adaptation, resiliency, and mitigation efforts too. So we're looking at the system, and today is really about a systems conversation. So we are literally all over the place in that sense, and that's actually just fine. One of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight, we heard from Bankole, talking about equality and impact and gaps. How do we ensure, from his point of view, as he was mentioning, that Africa is not only recognized as a place for contribution is really ultimately where that was going. David, you're mentioning a little bit more about the scaling pathways. Dr. Isha talking about reaching almost the last mile, thinking about not losing sight of those that are particularly more vulnerable, more exposed to some of the climate risks. And Mia, buying more time, that was a message that we heard from you a few times. We're thinking about, we see the IPCC report. We know that there's a finite period of time in which we can collaborate. The world can shift, can transition as well to mitigating some of these more impending risks. And then, Anis, you were sharing a lot about the mitigation side of efforts. So one question I'd like to kind of kick off with, and soon we'll move into a Q&A with the rest of the group that's on the call. This is something around that winner takes all dynamic and around impact. We mentioned earlier that we were curious about, how do we ensure that there's inclusivity around the creation process, the deployment process, but that we don't have an issue in which only a small number of, let's say, winners are the ones that are benefiting from the way in which the system is being gamed, so to speak. Does anybody want to jump in and take a bite at that one?
I'm happy to kick off.
Great.
So I think that two of the biggest levers that we have in ensuring that the development of climate technology is inclusive and that the deployment of these solutions is done with a holistic and humanist perspective are in the investors and the diversity of the base of investors that are backing these technologies, and in the diversity of the founding teams and early employees at the companies that are building them. And I think that just is a, when you bring diverse perspectives to the table, you have not only the opportunity to see from many perspectives to understand some of the potential unintended consequences, but you also are fundamentally, this is a global issue, and you need representation that looks like the globe. So personally, the vast majority of my extended family lives in Mali, in Bamako, in West Africa, where the average temperature increase as a result of climate change is going to be 1.5 times the global average. And that is a perspective that is embedded in my work, that is embedded in my motivation for doing this work. And those are communities that are top of mind as I do this work. We have someone on our team whose family is in India. And so I think that building a diverse, this is an area where diversity and inclusion on teams is just incredibly important. And the same is to be said for founding teams. One of the biggest levers that we have is investing in founders who are, again, approaching this work with a humanist perspective and thinking about inclusion and inclusivity of these technologies. And so those are two things that stand out to me.
Thanks, Mia. And I think you're kind of getting at some of the pieces around the power dynamics, right? So how do we calibrate the system that might be structurally set up for an imbalance of power is a piece of where this question is going and what we can also observe. Anybody else want to chime in? I know, Aisha, you brought this up actually in your intro as something that's really important. Is there anything from your point of view, or as you see as the CEO of Acumen in Pakistan, how are you going about this type of calibration, so to speak, of systems to make sure that there is an equality piece, but also an impact piece that's truly authentic in reaching those that need it?
Absolutely. And I just pick up on from where Mia left off, because we really do need to see the climate catastrophe in all its dimensions, not just in all the regions, but how it plays out. And so if we focus predominantly on mitigation, which is what we've done, and absolutely we go to net zero, but countries that are often not emitting very much at all are at the front lines of combating climate change. Now, this is the 570 million smallholder farmers who are responsible for a third of food production in the world. They are massively vulnerable. And what ends up happening, even despite intentions and saying that, look, we do need to invest in adaptation solutions, and this has been going on forever, but in reality, a very small proportion of financing goes to adaptation solutions. So to say that whatever level of climate change is there, we need to figure out ways of protecting the most vulnerable from it. And so why is it that only 5% to maybe on the top end, 20% of climate finance ends up going to adaptation? One of the reasons is, part of it is lack of representation and voice, in which some of these small vulnerable regions are not able to voice this. But part of it is really a fundamental issue around measuring impact and having the technology. So when you talk about emissions, it's relatively straightforward to measure CO2 displaced. But when you talk about how do you measure the impact of climate resilience on farmers, so to say, those are more complex measures, and we haven't really figured out how to articulate them in a way that is clear enough and actionable enough to be able to attract funding. So as we talk about making this more equitable and talk about more representation, I think we do need to figure out how do we create the right instruments, the right measurements for being able to look at adaptation. And again, I think, Mia, you mentioned that we do need a more inclusive and diverse approach on funding as well. If we're only looking at, public sector funding, and that ends up going to these large, massive projects, and it's hard to figure out exactly what's going on, or you look at where I sit, a more venture capital model of funding, those are all very specific, and we do need to change our definition. So if you're investing in ag tech, for example, which is part of climate tech, it does take a lot longer. You're not going to get the 20x returns instantly. So as investors, as individuals trying to solve for this problem, and I do think this is a moral imperative for all of us, individuals, institutions, we have to get together to solve it. We need to create the right measurements. We need to have the right mindset to come into it with the right frame. It'll take longer, it'll be harder, but it's absolutely necessary and it has to be done. There's no way around it.
Thanks so much, Aisha. And what I'd like to do is actually kind of kick it over, for starters, with David. He has a pretty strong background, I think, with a lot of the IMM and investor side. So I'd love to get your thoughts, David, around the ways in which, the measuring and monitoring the impact, not only on the adaptation, but perhaps even resiliency side. What does that look like? And if Bankole, if you're open to it, perhaps after that, you can share a little bit about what you see happening from the perspective of at least what's happening with your center, Nigeria Climate Innovation Center, the ways in which you're able to reimagine and integrate more voices to the top end of the conversation. So first to David on perhaps on the impact and measurement side, what you're seeing there, especially from the perspective of an investor as well. And then Bankole, if you don't mind, a little bit more about some of the trends, things that are happening on the ground for that strong representation. Over to you, David.
Thanks, Courtney. And really to sort of mirror what Mia and Aisha were saying, a lot of this has to do with behavioral change. And this is sort of a lot of the areas that we're looking to invest. For example, we're seeing a big shift from smart to intelligent, and basically from design to systems as we start talking about systems. When we start talking about systems, we start talking about the human element, as Mia was saying. And that really comes to be a strong part of this thing. And we're also seeing evidence of ruralization, this sort of shift away from urbanization to ruralization. Last mile, Mia brought that up as well. So I think when we start to look at from the measurement perspective, and believe me, the measurements conflicts, I'll say, that have been happening over the last 10 years, especially around impact investing, especially around measuring adaptation mitigation on climate. It really is what we're looking at is really towards that behavioral change, measuring that behavioral change. And that's what even the technology we look at to invest in the Climate Tech Fund is technology that would have a catalytic influence on behavioral change, because we think that that is really where the shift has to happen. And that's not only from the consumer side, that's got to be from the politician side, from the investor side, all the way down. And I think that shift is going to make things much more inclusive. On IMM directly, slowly the standards, they're not universal. They're certainly not standardized across the globe yet. But I think slowly the major IMM organizations are getting together and starting to work together on bringing this out. For example, even if you look at the SDG, the indicators behind the SDGs, that was made for development specialists. It certainly was not made for investors. Gin, a little more investor friendly. So you can actually start to look, but how do we bring these two together? Because you have to appease on one side, the supply of money, the investment side, whether it's infrastructure or all the way down to ag tech. And Aisha and I, we worked a while ago on an ag tech fund. But how do we work that together so there is a common understanding from all the stakeholders on exactly what you're trying to measure? Whether that's simply an interpretation, that would even be acceptable. But the SDG indicators are not very helpful with investors. Gin, a little more, certainly turning towards the business use on consumption. But from the political standpoint, still measuring against GDP, that's a fail in my eyes. So we have to look at different types of measure of economic growth. How do we de-link economic growth with energy growth? And how do we bring this together? So the concepts of energy security are not even measured across the board in most of the IMM. So these are the different things that really start to have together. And I really wish there was sort of a way that all the standards organizations would sort of get into a room and come up with some sort of universal interpretation where all the stakeholders can go to a common standard. It's almost like carbon exchanges and carbon pricing, where there's so many different variables out there, it gets too confusing. And I think this is a turnoff. My rant.
Thanks, Dave. Well, it takes someone that knows a lot to be able to think critically about it, right? And share more. And then thanks for that. So we've got a lot of IMM experts, I think, in the room, in the group, and for better and for worse, we've all tried to figure out, put our heads around it, and think about what that harmonization looks like, and the future of it also looks like as technology improves to even do the measurement as well. Bankole, as I mentioned, I'd love to pass it to you. Yes. And in thinking about this kind of diversity, inclusion, impact, voices, power structures, over to you.
Thank you very much, everyone. And I think having listened to everyone, I see that there's a similarity on what all of us are saying. And I'm going to pick it straight from David's rant. And I'm going to say that, there's a need for domestication of the kinds of technologies that we want to engage with in the different economies that we want to be. I really think that some of the solutions that we have seen that has come into Nigeria in the past few years around climate has always been disturbing. First of all, you get all the different insights of businesses telling you, look, we look for businesses which, that are looking for $10 million to $20 million thereof, 30 to 100, size tickets. Remember that the green economy in Africa is really about 5 to 10 years old. And so everyone that's looking for a business that is already having or some tech or infrastructure that is, that has that 10 to 20x or 30 to 100 million needs. I think that is going to be a long shot, right? But when you look at all the other businesses that have been, that can equally come together as a cluster, which is why at the NCIC, we thought about the cluster development model, which we see as what that can really solve that gap when it comes to adopting technology and as well as demonstrating them and as well as understanding the markets. So let's take, for instance, the circularity market, for instance. So circular economy is really very huge in Nigeria. Many people think that circular economy is just recent. No, circularity has been in Nigeria for over 10 to 20, 20 years, right? But it's been very traditional in the case that those who play within that sphere of, of activities view it as a business they need to do on the side, not something they should take wholesome as a business. But in the last 5 years, what we've seen is that many of the different sectors under circularity, not just plastic alone, has got some deep niche, capital intensive equipment facing kind of needs that just thinking of your $100 to $20 million need might not be able to fit. So when you're rating and trying to understand the the impact that is likely to be generated, that will be missed out, because at the early stage of the businesses, many of them are, not to use the word survival, but many of those businesses are reaching some of the some of the needs at the bottom of the pyramid. And when you understand the bottom of the pyramid market, the margins are usually very small, and you need to have as much patience as possible, and you need to deal with a larger number. And so when you're dealing with larger numbers, that is where the concept of cluster development model comes in. And what means that if a recycling company needs about $1 million to be able to scale from where it is, and you find 7 of those or 10 of those types of recycling company, I think that being able to generate that 10x or that 10 million worth of dollars of investment ticket, that has already been taken care of. And you're solving multiple challenges at the same time. And when you draw that down all the way to the waste picking side of things, the needs at each different stages of this value chain has got, the price tickets cannot be needed by just one business alone. You need to really factor in that cluster side of things. And then when it comes to the behavioral change part, right? You need to understand also that, when we're dealing with investors, we also like to help them manage expectations, knowing that whatever is permissible from what country you're coming from is likely going to be different when you get to this side of the world. Now, remember that Africa is not a country. It's about 52 to 53 other countries. And dealing with Nigeria alone is like dealing with about 6 or 7 other types of countries entirely. And so the challenges you face in Ghana are totally different from what you face in Nigeria, even though we both love jollof. But all these things are very different, right? But again, when strategies are being designed for some of these markets, right, you need to also factor in the dynamism of that market. And which is why I'm saying that the behavioral change campaign type of energy transition, use of plastic, and even new energy models is very important. For instance, if you're dealing with basic technology as briquettes for home cooking, or you're dealing with hydrogen, right? The market for hydrogen is there, but the adoption rate is going to be really very slow, right? If you're looking for conversion to gas, there's a huge market for for gas to energy kinds of solution. And so we also have to look back also and say that when we're setting goals and trying to achieve net zero, we should also understand that there are some economies who are really looking for that alternative on how to scale beyond of where they are. And so many times often when people are talking about coming to push for green economic tangents in Nigeria, or rather in some other African countries, I always try to help them understand, first of all, that first we need to solve that particular problem, than having to solve the problem of trying to solve the world, the world's problem. So if your business model will help you get an alternative to an already existing larger market, and where many of them will transition to green, it is better you talk about the benefits of that, right? Than to look at how the issue of trying to save the world, it might not just play out. But when you play, when you have the issue of trying to solve an alternative challenge, or rather you're trying to solve a challenge with an alternative solution, then you have a better perspective of getting the adoption rate as quickly as anything. So for us, we really think that they really need some form of understanding of the different markets that you're going to walk up into, and at the same time being able to domesticate some of the technologies that are that will be brought into these economies, and also understanding that every economy you go to, there are equally markets in there who are trying to scale. So disruption many times turns to distractions, but nevertheless, I believe that with a more concrete understanding of the company, or rather the country you like to walk into, I think that it will give you a lot more perspective on dealing with the dynamics of that country or that location than trying to use a one-size-fits-all. Thank you.
So many amazing and really important points you made, Bankole, and I really appreciate. I think one of the key things that you're bringing up is contextualization, and I love that this disruption can sometimes lead to distraction, as you put it, right? So one thing, we put it in the chat box. If you'd like to have a question for the panel, we do have a Slido, and I'm noticing a few questions coming up already. And in the spirit of a lightning panel, right? So this is supposed to be quick, open the appetite, and then we segue. I'm going to ask, one thing we haven't talked so much about is around this policy dynamic. And Enes, I'm really curious to hear your perspective around in complex policy environments. Let's just look at all the COPs of the past several years, right? So, we haven't gotten the majority of voices necessarily filtering to the top and vice versa. And sometimes policy is quite slow, and that's just the way the nature is. So how do you get things done when you not necessarily are in the most efficient dynamic, let's say, governance system per se, if you had any thoughts around that. And then we're going to close and wrap up the panel with one of the key questions that are coming up on the Slido, which is really around so this is a question to all the panelists, just to be thinking about in case you have something you'd like to share in summary. But where's the space to bridge these conversations across the spectrum, right? So from small to mid to large scale actors, where's that space where we're not talking in echo chambers? How to make that happen meaningfully? And then perhaps if you had any thoughts around unintended consequences, how can we mitigate the risk that the work that we try to do with good intentions creates and amplifies and exacerbates more challenges down the road. So first to Enes to share a little bit if there's any thoughts around this policy dynamic, which is huge, right? And then we'll wrap up the panel with any kinds of last summary. So Enes first, and then we'll hear some maybe closing thoughts from each of the speakers. Over to you, Enes.
Thank you, Courtney. Certainly one of at least our core philosophies has been never wait for government. So whatever you can do yourself on a commercial basis, working with the market and societies and communities, just do it. Don't ever wait for government. And I think in principle, the macro trends support that. I think on the modularity of systems, whether it's water treatment to renewable energy and storage, because they're becoming modular and more cost effective, then decisions can be more decentralized and community based. We're seeing that on the financing side with more and more progress on the microfunding side, and we're seeing it on the blockchain side in terms of just systems and communities. So I think the overall macro trends make us a bit less dependent on what they're doing at COP. Certainly, if anything useful comes, great. We were just at the UN MENA Climate Week in Dubai last week, and one of our biggest challenges has been with the Green Climate Fund, and it was supposed to be as an accelerator for global kind of climate impact. At the same time, the Green Climate Fund is the bottleneck for us launching our follow-on fund, just as an example. So we're supposed to be an accelerator. Now our other LPs or investors are waiting for them to come on board, and they have a 12-month process. So in some sense, government will try to do the right thing, but we can't wait for them. And I think these macro trends of blockchain, costs coming down on distributed systems are all helpful for us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I think the key message is loud and clear. We need to work together smart and not necessarily wait for anyone. That being said, just wanted to put it out there. We do have I see in the chat box, really great participants here. We have a LinkedIn community of practice. So hopefully you can network literally with everybody as well, but please do continue to feel free to share who you are and what you're doing in the chat box. In the spirit of the lightning panel wrapping up, the bolt has struck. And we will continue with the R&D, but just wanted to kind of have the last closing thoughts from every speaker. If you had anything you wanted to add specifically for us to take with us as we move forward, please feel welcome to do that. And then some of the key questions that are coming up in the Slido are really about, how do we bridge these silos? Where's the space to have those conversations? Because otherwise it's quite inefficient moving forward. And if there's any kind of thoughts around mitigating risk of unintended consequences. So it doesn't have to answer all of the questions, but if you had any thoughts around that, that would be great. And I think we'll just go on maybe we can start with Mia, Aisha, David, Bankole, and Ines. So over to you, Mia.
Thanks, Courtney. Yeah, I would just wrap up by saying, to Enes's point, the modular and decentralized nature of a lot of the technologies of this, clean tech 2.0 or climate tech wave, which is, by the way, one of the things that I think has allowed for more rapid innovation on them and unit economics that kind of look different from the first set of clean technologies that we deployed in the early 2000s and that continue to move down the cost curve themselves. But the pace is just much more rapid of hardware development as a result of that modularity. But it really lends itself to deployment at smaller scales, which just means a fundamentally more community-centered approach. And so we see our job as early stage investors to help bring those technologies down the cost curve so that communities can have self-determination around deployment and what solution set makes the most sense. And I think the other core piece of that is fostering innovation that is happening on the ground in different places across the world and financing those solutions. And so, yeah, I think maintaining a global perspective, maintaining a focus on the communities that will be hit first and worst, and ultimately with the end goal in mind of being able to broaden the solution set that is available for them and making it the more economic and more economically feasible and frankly, just better choice along a number of dimensions. So excited to be doing this work and excited to be in community with this group.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mia. And the community-centered piece is so critical, and love that you're working on that both from the investment side to the mobilization of resources and technologies. As mentioned, maybe Aisha, if you'd like to chime in with your last words to leave us with.
Sure. I mean, I'll just close with the same call for action, right? We've been talking about the climate crisis for decades. I mean, even before I was born, and now it is a catastrophe that is here. So it is up to us at the individual level, at the organizational level, at the government level. We all have to figure out how to act now. I think the conversation has to move decidedly into action, which is what Enes was saying as well. We don't wait for anyone. If you're a country that's not emitting, you still need to figure out how to solve for the fact that you'll be on the receiving end of global warming. And so action, action, action. And that's what I'll close with also this optimism, because technology does give us the tools to solve for it as well. Things are very different from where they were 30, 40 years ago. We have within reach the solution for this problem. We need to just do and move together.
Amazing, thank you. And that's also a good plug for everyone to stay on, because we're about to wrap up our last 30 minutes with an action-oriented conversation. But first, before we do that, over to David.
Action, action. I would go for that as well. One of the things that I'm experiencing actually right now, as far as the community of practice and these types of things, you've got the practitioner levels, you've got the investor level. It's actually, I'm finding at the research level, because I'm very optimistic about some of the new technologies that are coming out. They won't be commercialized probably for 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, but some of the areas around storage capability, certainly biodegradability with material sciences, as everyone's looking to look at material science. And I think there's going to be a lot of great technologies, but the way that we're approaching is we're getting in really early. We're getting on very early stage technology to have that influence at that point and really start to work with the researchers and the developers of the technology on where can you then start to pace it out, because everything is going to touch climate. It goes from gender all the way across. So how do we really bring this across? So that's the approach that we're taking on it. And I would recommend it for others to get into and start to understand we're moving from innovation back to invention. With all this new technology. So we're going back to the 70s, if you will, before the time of the internet. And there's going to be a totally different perspective, because most of the investors that I talk with do not understand the technology at all. So getting back and understanding how this technology is being developed and where it can be applied anywhere along the adaptation to the mitigation sort of spanning, and how to bring that across. I think that will be a big influence and will help a lot of these technologies move in the right direction, as you were saying, Courtney, and not cause other issues that we're just not being aware of.
Amazing. Thanks. Thank you so much, David. And over to Bankole and then Enes to wrap up the session part before we move into the ecosystem R&D.
Great. So from my own ends, right, I think that there are a lot that has been missing around the early stage side of, financing in Africa. I think that there's a lot of, big talk about a lot of, financial or, green financing or investments, that is being spoken about. Almost every meeting you go to, there's some conversation about climate financing. And the figures are, there are a lot of figures. There are no depth into many of them. There are a lot of talks about how this will help to improve climate financing, but there's a huge gap between what is being mentioned and what is being drawn down. So I think that there needs to be some form of conscious way also of creating that investment possibilities, working with local players, with local stakeholders, and also trying to identify and looking way past government. Now, there's another trend that has been happening that I really think that it needs to stop on a larger perspective. When governments and governments speak, a government knows that another government might not be able to manage a particular fund, but they still go ahead to give that fund. I think that is hyper ridiculous. I think that when you're working with players in that field or in that industry, it is always good to build an ecosystem with an additional oversight to how many of these interactions can happen. I think that early stage markets is also gradually turning into the early days of the tech startup market also, where everybody just wants to see, what is the traction and all those bunch of, business plan jargons. And it's also going to be a problem because, again, we might end up just jumping on the guys who says to be doing much but have no depth, and also missing out on those who really have that tangible, possibility of having to help those at the bottom of the pyramid, just like how Aisha said. So I believe that investors should take it a step further by understanding who are the local players, who are the stakeholders, and who can they align with in the course of their work. And that will help also to manage, the excesses of investment crisis. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And localization, contextualization, really key themes that you are, bringing back to us to the forefront. Enes, over to you.
On my side, I think, the attendees here, we ourselves can be a force in doing things and having impact. And one of the ideas that we're working on now is looking at creating a blockchain-based exchange for climate credits. And I think there's more that can be done to bring together kind of climate and the blockchain. And there was interest from even the UNFCCC and other entities on these types of initiatives, but I think ultimately, taking crowdfunding for climate projects through the blockchain is another opportunity. So we may find that we have new means, and I'm happy to help explore or work with or engage with anyone that's interested on any of this kind of nexus of kind of blockchain and climate. So happy to learn about it and look at it together.
Right. I think we've got a lot of people in the room that would be following up with you on that space for sure. So it's my pleasure to say, thank you so much on behalf of the Oxford Climate Tech Initiative, 100% volunteer driven, collaboration based out of the business school at Oxford. So big thanks to our lightning panel. Of course, panelists, you should be sticking around because we want to make sure that you're in the rooms with everybody else. For those of you that can stay on, this is really important. Let me describe what we're going to be doing in the next 30 minutes. And of course, it's up to you to determine if you'd like to stick around, but it would be great if you did. And this is the reason why. So what we're trying to do here is actually in real time source your perceptions around some of these extremely sticky questions. If you go to our website, you'll notice that we're really interested in a just and green transition. We're not just talking about finding the next Elon Musk to send us to the moon in something cool, but we're really trying to find climate tech that is, equitable, that makes an impact and can be scaled and has a big opportunity for that type of impact. So what we're doing here in this breakout, so we have as we introduced in the very beginning, we have our facilitators, our conversation guides. We'll go through a process in which we'll have an opportunity for you to obviously get to know each other, but then have a conversation around what does it look like when we're thinking about the trends and the opportunities and the challenges. At the end, we'll ask if you wish. This is obviously an opportunity for you to, if you'd like, but there's a virtual post-it notes. And in that note, it will go into our live Kumu map. So this is what you see on the screen here. This will be shared with you in real time right after. So all the conversations, we have over 100 people here together right now. Your voice matters, and we want to make sure that it's documented, if you will. This is research that we're doing. It feeds into a bigger picture thing that we'll tell you about towards the end. But these are some of the challenges. We already pretty much touched on quite a lot of these. If you look at the metrics, if you look at the negative externalities, big questions we still don't have resolved. What are some of the trends? How do we make this more of an equalized playing field, et cetera, et cetera? The goal is not to go through this as a checklist in the next 20 minutes, but just for you, if some of these questions speak to you, we want to hear your perspective. So this is the process. And literally, when you go to the breakouts, you'll have a link to join a Miro board. If you're not familiar with Miro or Mural, don't worry. But that's the way we were going to be taking the notes of the conversations. And if you have any questions, we're on standby to help you out. We will come back to this larger group in about 20-ish, 25-ish minutes before we wrap up at hour. So Robert, over to you. If you could just confirm that we're all good and set up for moving in towards the smaller groups.
Absolutely. Thanks, Courtney. So I'm going to now open a bunch of rooms for you, and you should be able to navigate in. If you have any problems in the rooms, there will be a button that you can press to request help, and then Courtney or I will run to your rescue. And you should receive your facilitators, who will give you this link, and you should be able to join. So let us know if you have any issues.
And if you need to run away, no worries. But you'll have a chance to obviously network within the group. And we have the LinkedIn community of practice also going in the chat box, so you can connect with everyone after. So I believe the rooms are being open.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And for our panelists, if you want to eavesdrop, chime in, please do join.
Does anybody not have a room?
How do I get a room?
I will. I'll move you in a sec, David. I'm just waiting to see everyone else fly to their rooms. Do you want to pick a random number between 1 and 16?
We have
between
16
1 and
rooms.
16. Let's go with 9. 9.
Right, beautiful.
Bankole, do you need a room as well?
Yes, please.
Bankole, do you want to pick a number between 1 and 16
number?
that isn't 9?
Yesterday was my birthday, so 7. Let's go with 7.
Oh,
Amazing.
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great.
I think everyone else should have a request to join a room.
Okay, maybe Ali's logged in with 2 different.
Yeah, I think some folks are logged in on their phones as well.
Okay, cool. For me, do I have the ability to, I wanted to pop around.
I think I might have to move you, which is a little clunky because you can only have one.
Okay, I'm co-host.
You can only have one main host. Yeah, I'm not sure if as co-host you can bounce around, but if you can, do it.
Okay, I'll let you keep the hosting. Yeah, maybe I'll just ping you to move around. I guess we're still recording this, but we can edit it out.
Yeah, I can take care of that. I did get a message off of Ali, who was saying that I think it's Ehsan was unable to join because of a power outage. So would you be interested in maybe joining room 6 first?
Yep, let's do it.
Sweet. Okay.
Thanks. Hey, Robert, real quick.
Yep.
Please send us a 5-minute warning at 20 past the hour and then bring us back at 25 minutes past the hour.
Okay, lovely.
Thank you. Wizard of Oz over there. Okay.
All right. Do you want to just ping me when you want to be moved?
Yeah, sure. Oh, Robert, you
Yes.
need aren't you supposed to be in a room?
Robert, you. Okay.
I had to reset my screen sharing thing and I had to restart Zoom.
Right. Okay.
Oh, okay. So
you're in room 12, right?
And Zahane's walking them through it, but
Oh, okay,
yeah.
great. I'm sure she's
Okay.
doing great. Fantastic.
You are on your way to room 12, Robert.
Thank you.
And I'm in room 6. Is that right?
You're about to be.
Okay.
Oh, wrong Courtney. There we go.
Okay. See you later.
See you in a bit.
Yeah, soon.
Hi, is this Robert?
Hello.
Hi, yeah, I just sent you a message, a direct message. So I was in room 30.
Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll put you there.
Okay, thank you.
Were you having some technical issues?
No, I was on my phone, but I think I'm able to use my phone to do the mural and everything, the mirror. So
I see. Okay.
because I didn't select open with an app, so I switched to my computer.
Okay. Are you assigned to a different breakout room by any chance? Because I can't see you in my list of unassigned participants.
Yes, so I'm assigned to room 13. So that I mentioned in my message that if you could put me back in room 13, please.
Do you have a notification to join the breakout room? I think you should.
So I'm already in it on my phone.
Okay.
So how does it work? I'm already in it on my phone, but now I'm talking to you from my PC.
Yeah, do you have a notification on your PC asking you to join a room? That's all.
It had asked me to join room 15 and I closed it. And I said, let me send a message to you then.
Okay, cool.
How
about now?
Yes, I got it now. Thank you so
Brilliant.
much.
Amazing. Okay, I think we're coming back to the final minutes together. As people are joining, I know, of course, we never have enough time to build the full conversation, but just wanted to mention that we do have a request, which is now in the chat box. As you can see, if you're able to literally think about the top thing that came up for you, and then put that in our virtual post-it note, it goes here, it's a Google form, and then that will get synced live. We'll have this embedded in our website for you to look at. You can literally actually click on the link of the post-it note and go to the map now. But if you want to add more than one post-it, no problem. So big thanks again. I know that was not enough time, but we did get certain things started and we do want to continue to build our community of practice. So that being said, what's next? Well, we have a lot of different irons in the fire, and some is of course related to you getting involved in the COP. So that link also has been shared several times throughout the last 90 minutes. We do hope that we can continue the networking, the idea networking, the fundraising over there in that space. We are working on a lot of different research threads. So this is also on the website itself, and more convenings. So we're looking at different ways in which we can efficiently use, for example, a climate tech radar to track, you know, the collective intelligence of what's emerging on that scale of ideas to commercialization of climate tech. And then of course, there's the teaching and convening around that. But before you go, one thing that we would love, I'm going to again put the virtual post-it note here, but one thing is your ideas on the session. So the first thing is quite simple, it takes less than 30 seconds, but this Mentimeter on a scale from 1 to 5, if you can just let us know what this meant to you, how we can improve. The next slide right after will have a space for you to offer more open-ended feedback and how you'd like to get involved as well. But that, of course, is one more time just to say we are available in this space on the climate on the LinkedIn. So with that being said, I'm going to wrap it up and say big thanks to all of our participants, speakers, facilitators, moderators, and of course the extended volunteer team. This is just the beginning of many, many conversations and hopefully action-oriented work that we can do together moving forward. So big thanks to the Skoll Foundation for the World Forum and for hosting and letting us convene this session together on their Ecosystem Day. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening, depending on where in the planet you are. Take care, everyone, and see you next time.
Everybody,
Cheers.
thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Everybody,
Thank
thanks
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
See ya.
I know.
I think we can stop recording.